The boarding line at Gate 43 was already forming as announcements crackled over the loudspeakers. Children tugged at carry-ons. Businessmen scanned emails. And in the middle of it all stood Captain Amara Fields, tall, composed, and dressed in a crisp navy blue uniform with 4 gold bars on each shoulder. She clutched a paper cup of lukewarm coffee in one hand and her flight folder in the other, eyes scanning the terminal like any other pilot preparing for takeoff. It was just another morning at JFK, just another flight to Atlanta. But for Amara, no flight was ever truly routine. She walked with purpose, not just because she was the one in command, but because she had learned painfully that presence matters when you're a black woman in spaces people still don't expect you to belong. As she approached the gate desk, she gave the agent a friendly nod. Captain Fields, we're all set. Packs are starting to board, the agent said, handing over the final manifest. Great, Amara replied, her voice calm and warm. She turned toward the boarding ramp, but not before noticing a family of 4, white, well-dressed, standing stiffly near the front of the priority line. The father kept checking his watch. The mother held a designer purse a little too tightly. The 2 teenage kids avoided eye contact with everyone around them. But it wasn't until Amara walked past them toward the aircraft that she caught it. The mother's sharp intake of breath, the quick, subtle step backward, and then the whisper, "Let's ask to move seats. I'm not sitting next to her for 3 hours." Amara didn't react, not outwardly. Years of training, both in the cockpit and in life, had taught her how to keep her face unreadable. But it landed. Of course it did. It always did. The irony, though. She wasn't a passenger. She was the one flying the plane. And in less than an hour, that same family would have no choice but to place their lives and their discomfort entirely in her hands. Amara smiled to herself, not out of spite, but from something deeper, a quiet strength. Let them move their seats. She'd still be the one taking them 30,000 feet into the sky. The cabin was buzzing with the usual shuffle of passengers, stowing bags, adjusting headrests, and claiming elbow room. The white family from the gate had indeed requested new seats, now settled in row 4, far from where they'd assumed the unpleasant situation would be. Their daughter was scrolling through social media. The son wore earbuds. The mother occasionally glanced down the aisle to check if that woman had boarded yet. No sign of her. Behind the locked flight deck door, Captain Amara Fields ran through her final pre-flight checklist beside First Officer David Lin, a Korean-American pilot she'd flown with dozens of times before. All systems green, he said. Amara nodded. Let's get them home. Moments later, her voice came on over the intercom, calm, steady, and professional. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking, Captain Amara Fields. Welcome aboard Flight 228 with non-stop service to Atlanta. We're expecting clear skies today with a cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. Estimated flight time is just under 2 hours. We thank you for flying with us, and we'll be pushing back shortly. There was a long pause in the cabin, the kind of silence that only happens when something unspoken shifts. In row 4, the father lowered his phone. The mother blinked. Their daughter slowly turned to her. Did she just say Captain Fields? She asked. The mother stiffened. That can't be the same woman. But deep down, they knew. It was the same woman who'd walked past them, the one they'd recoiled from at the gate, the one they had refused to sit near. Now, she wasn't in seat 2A. She was in the cockpit. And every person on that aircraft, every child, every executive, every traveler afraid of turbulence, now depended entirely on her training, her calm, her hands. The father shifted uncomfortably. The mother said nothing. In the jump seat, a flight attendant named Carla smirked and whispered to a coworker, "Wait till they find out she's logged more hours than most pilots twice her age." Captain Fields set her headset down, took a sip of now cold coffee, and looked out the window at the sun rising over the tarmac. She didn't need to see their faces. She already knew the look. But she also knew what came next. Not doubt. Not discomfort. Respect. Earned not through proving anything, but by flying like she always had, with excellence. The aircraft climbed steadily into the sky, engines humming, clouds thinning below. Inside the cockpit, everything was routine. Instruments steady, communication clear, and the morning sun casting warm light across the control panel. But 30 minutes into the flight, an alert pinged. Weather ahead. Not dangerous, not yet, but enough for Captain Amara Fields to lean forward, her eyes narrowing. A line of rough air, flanked by unstable winds, would cut directly across their projected flight path. She tapped her headset. Atlanta Center, this is Flight 228, requesting slight deviation east to avoid turbulence near waypoint Charlie Bravo. Flight 228, deviation approved. Maintain heading 180. Amara adjusted the yoke gently, barely noticeable to anyone in the cabin. But within minutes, the turbulence rolled in. Not violent, but sharp. Sudden drops, jostling vibrations. Passengers clutched armrests. A baby cried. Drink carts were secured mid-aisle. Nervous laughter filled the air. In row 4, the White family shifted uncomfortably. The mother gasped as the plane bounced again. Is this normal? She asked, voice thin. Her husband didn't answer. But up front, calm reigned. Ladies and gentlemen, Amara's voice came over the intercom, even and smooth. We've hit a patch of rough air. Nothing to worry about. We're adjusting our course and expect to be back in clear skies shortly. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Her tone didn't just explain. It anchored. And something began to change in the cabin. People stopped fidgeting. Anxiety loosened. Because when she spoke, people trusted her. Back in the cockpit, David glanced over. You always make turbulence sound like a lullaby. Amara gave a small smile. It's not just about flying the plane. It's about flying the people. 10 minutes later, the ride smoothed out. Outside, the clouds broke, revealing endless blue sky ahead. In row 4, the mother exhaled in relief. She sounds so calm, the daughter said quietly. She is calm, the father muttered. The woman who had once made them uncomfortable was now the one they silently depended on, not just to land the plane, but to carry them through their fear. And not a single one of them could deny it now. She didn't just belong in that seat. She owned it. The fastened seatbelt sign lit up again as the plane began its descent into Atlanta. Captain Amara Fields maintained steady control, her voice calm over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared for landing. Local temperature is 75 degrees, with light winds from the east. On behalf of myself and First Officer Lynn, thank you for flying with us today. The aircraft banked gently to the left, revealing the sprawling city below. Passengers began to gather their belongings and stretch their limbs, but row 4 sat quietly, no longer irritated, no longer superior. Just thoughtful. The mother stole a glance toward the cockpit door. For the first time, she saw it clearly. The gold captain's insignia stitched into Amara's jacket. The quiet authority in the way she moved. The pride in her voice. No longer just that woman from the gate. Now, the pilot. The daughter whispered, "She's amazing, Mom." The mother didn't reply right away. Her eyes lingered on the cockpit. She nodded slowly as if trying to accept something her upbringing had always denied her. "She is," she finally said. The landing was perfect, smooth, centered, professional. Applause broke out, the kind people give when they feel safe, grateful, and quietly impressed. Not because of drama, but because something about this flight had shifted them. When the cabin doors opened, passengers began to disembark row by row. Amara and David stood just outside the cockpit, as always, thanking people for flying. When the White family reached the front of the plane, they hesitated. The father gave a curt nod. "Thank you, Captain." Amara met his eyes with a respectful but unreadable expression. "Have a good day, sir." The daughter paused, then reached out. "I want to be a pilot one day," she said, looking up at Amara. Amara's face softened. "Then don't let anything stop you. Not for a second." Finally, the mother stepped forward. She opened her mouth, struggled for words, then simply said, "Thank you. For everything." Amara nodded, eyes steady. "You're welcome." They walked away changed, not by lectures, not by arguments, but by the quiet, undeniable force of earned respect. And as the terminal swallowed them up, Amara turned back to the plane. Another flight waited, another sky to claim. Because every landing was just the start of another takeoff. Later that evening, after the plane was powered down and the cockpit lights dimmed, Captain Amara Fields sat alone in the crew lounge, with her logbook open and a cup of tea cooling beside her. Another flight, another landing, another moment of quiet victory. But this one felt different. She didn't need confirmation. She hadn't lived her life chasing approval. But something about the look in that young girl's eyes, the shift in that mother's voice, reminded her why she stayed in the sky. Because representation wasn't just about being seen. It was about being undeniable. Her phone buzzed. A message from a young flight attendant she'd flown with once. Saw you landed Flight 228 today. My little sister wants to be like you. Thank you for showing her what's possible. Amara smiled. She remembered what it felt like to sit in coach, reading flight manuals on her phone, ignored by the world. She remembered the instructors who doubted her, the passengers who looked past her, and the doors that took twice the effort to open. But she had opened them. Not with noise, with excellence. Now, every time she stepped into a cockpit, she didn't just carry a crew. She carried a message. That skill has no color. That grace under pressure has no gender. That being underestimated is not a weakness, it's fuel. Somewhere, a little girl had walked off that plane and now believed she could fly. And that, Amara thought, is a legacy worth leaving. She closed her logbook, stood tall, and headed for the terminal exit. Not just as a pilot, but as a symbol. Because today, she hadn't just landed a plane. She'd lifted something bigger. A month later, Captain Amara Fields stood at the edge of a high school auditorium stage in Atlanta, wearing her full uniform. Not for a flight this time, but for a purpose just as important. The room was packed with young faces, mostly students of color, wide-eyed and restless, notebooks in their laps, dreams in their hearts. It was career week, and Amara had been invited to speak. She hadn't expected the turnout, but word had spread. The black woman pilot, the one who stood her ground, the one who flew that plane. She walked to the podium as silence swept over the crowd. When I was your age, she began, I'd never met a pilot who looked like me. I didn't see myself in cockpits, in uniforms, or in flight manuals. But I learned that the skies don't ask where you come from. They ask if you're ready to fly. Her voice was soft but powerful, each word landing with purpose. She spoke of long nights, of being the only one in the room, of the way people stared, or worse, dismissed. She shared how she never responded with anger or noise, but with consistency, with presence, with precision. You don't have to ask for space, she told them. You create it, by showing up, staying ready, and refusing to shrink. In the crowd, a girl in the second row held a tiny model airplane in her lap. Her eyes never left Amara. After the talk, dozens of students rushed forward, for photos, for hugs, for hope. One boy asked, Captain Fields, do you ever get scared up there? She smiled gently. Every now and then, she said. But then I remember, I've done this before, and I belong up there. Later, when she stepped outside into the golden afternoon light, she looked up at the sky, vast, open, waiting. The same sky that once felt like it belonged to someone else, now carried her name in the wind. A few weeks had passed. This time, Captain Amara Fields wasn't in uniform. No hat, no stripes, no announcement over the intercom. Just jeans, a jacket, and a worn travel backpack slung over one shoulder. She was flying today, but as a passenger. It was a rare vacation, a quiet moment. At the gate in Atlanta's airport, she stood sipping a coffee, watching the usual rush of travelers, families juggling strollers, business people typing furiously, and the occasional chaos over overhead bin space. Then she saw them, the same white family, the mother, the father, their two teens. They didn't notice her, not without her uniform, not in this setting, but something was different this time. Their daughter was laughing and talking to a young black woman in a crisp co-pilot's uniform, standing near the gate. You're flying us today? The girl asked brightly. Co-pilot, the woman replied with a grin. But not for long. Captain's chair is calling. The mother watched the exchange and smiled, a warm, sincere smile. No discomfort, no edge. The father stepped forward and offered a polite nod to the co-pilot. Thanks for flying us. Feels like we're in good hands, he said. Not condescending, not surprised, just respectful. Amara stood a few steps away, quietly observing. She didn't speak up. She didn't say, "Remember me?" There was no need. She watched them board the flight calmly, watched the young black co-pilot walk confidently toward the jet bridge, her future waiting in the cockpit. A new generation, a new chapter. Amara looked up through the terminal skylight at a plane soaring across the sky. Somewhere up there, another woman like her was in command, unseen by the world below, but leading it forward with every mile. She smiled to herself and walked toward her own gate, because some flights come to a close, and others, they're just taking off.